70 pay and pack summertime.
Chocolate is.
All right, hey, what's up, y'all? So, guys, I am so excited to be with my buddy Nathan Daniel. Nathan is just pure genius, and you're gonna love this guy. Yeah, right. So we're gonna love this conversation where he teaches on this concept of a pebble in a pond, and I think this is gonna go a long ways. So you're in for a great conversation. This is off the cuff, not scripted.
Yeah, no script here.
No script.
I barely had any coffee this morning, so.
Well, you know what? Cheers to that.
Here, cheers. Let's kick this coffee conversation off. Here we go.
All right, Nathan. So I'm gonna just tell us about your pebble in a pond concept, man.
Man, it's interesting, the journey of life in general, right? And it's just funny that there's certain patterns, right? Like if you go back and you look at the different patterns that happen around you, one of those things for me was this idea and this concept that I call Be the Pebble. And so starting out at a very young age, I had a mentor actually give me a little rock one time. And, it was like a little green glass rock or something like that. And he's like, here, keep this with you. It means prosperity and all this other kind of stuff. And then a little further down my journey,
like voodoo magic?
Kind of. Yeah, very much. It was very much voodoo magic. Like it's going to rain and all that kind of stuff. I was like, whatever. But, over time, I just kind of remembered that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I hung on to it and still have the rock to this day on my desk. But, I went a little further down the road and, started my first business when I was 14 years old. And, so I've always been a little bit of an entrepreneur at heart. So, after leaving college, after going into the corporate space because I had to have a job and all this kind of stuff, and I jumped back into entrepreneurship and started a real estate career, right? So I started real estate, and well, the thing about being in real estate, we spend a lot of time in our car.
Yeah.
And a lot of time in our car.
Now, clarifying real estate, this is as a real estate broker?
So,
as a real estate agent?
As a real estate agent back in 2009, everybody's bailing out of the industry. I just jumped right in, and I saw opportunity. And one of my passions has always been around investing, right? Investing in real estate. Not so much like on the fix and flips side. We've done a couple, but, at the end of the day, it's like real estate was the vehicle that was going to get me where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
But I got to drive around a lot, show people houses, help them buy and sell and all the things. But I got to spend a lot of time in my car in Dallas. And traffic in Dallas is not light. So I listened to Audiobook University, Zig Ziglar and all that stuff. But I wasn't listening to like leadership books a lot. I was listening to like fantasy books and sci-fi and all this other kind of stuff just to kind of entertain me. And well, one of these books popped out, and it was around this idea of Be the Pebble, right? Yeah. Pebble in the pond and everything else. And so, that was the second time it popped up in my life. Well, then fast forward, amazing real estate career, building a team, building a couple technology companies that led to leading a brokerage, and stepped into the CE role of a company, grew it. It was fantastic. And yet there was something I wasn't really fulfilled after about 5 years in the role. And I just got lost. I got lost in myself. I didn't have purpose. I didn't have passion. Called one of my coaches that I had, one of my very first coaches, and she did a Zoom with me, and she's like, man, you look dead inside. And I was like a walking zombie. And so I went on this journey of finding myself and looking at my story and just trying to understand, like, what are the patterns in my life? And this Be the Pebble kept coming up, right? And there was multiple things. And so, the idea and the concept is that every single one of us, no matter what we do every single day, we have the ability to impact the world.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody wants to go out and make an impact in the world today. But what I go on to talk about is like, well, what is the world?
What is the world?
Yeah.
What do you think the world is?
I don't know. Let's keep watching.
All right, so I want to come back to the what is the world concept in a second, but you mentioned two things. So you mentioned your mentor.
Yep.
You mentioned your coach.
Yep.
And then you also mentioned a second thing.
Yeah.
All right. So
Audiobook University.
Yeah. Well, it was Audiobook University. That's like you're adding to your knowledge and things like that. But talk about what the power of mentoring and coaching. What made you decide that you needed a mentor and you needed a coach in your life, and what has that done for you?
I had a lot of great people I looked up to growing up and stuff.
Yeah.
At a very young age, I was told that I'm going to be the man of the house and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was just a very old soul at a very young age, and my parents would attest to that. But I guess growing up, I looked at it as everything that I ever did in school, whether it was playing sports, whether it was in band, whether it was hobbies on the side or anything like that. There's always growing up, you always have some kind of mentor, some kind of coach, somebody teaching you along the way. Yet, what I started seeing for myself was that as I left that environment, when I didn't have sports, when I didn't have those things anymore, I didn't really have a whole lot of coaches. I didn't have a whole lot of people guiding me through that process. And so I always had naturally gravitated, because I'm idea driven. I very entrepreneurial at heart, and I was pretty good about getting in rooms with people that were much smarter than me.
Right.
And well, when they saw my ambition, they saw my drive at a very young age, I was kind of an oddity to them, because where most kids at 14 years old are out riding bikes and getting into mischief and stuff, I'm going, ooh, look, investment, or here, how we can do this business and all this stuff. And so I think they just kind of naturally hey, I'm going to take you on as a mentor or mentee or whatever.
Right.
But I just started looking at it as a place to go to have conversations with people that had been in my shoes before, that I could get advice from.
Sure.
So I didn't have to, duplicate their mistakes.
Got it.
And so I could get there faster.
Got it.
That's as far as the mentor. As far as coaching is concerned, it's a whole different relationship. It's more about pushing mentally. It's about pushing through adversity and all that kind of stuff. And so I also thought having a coach, but not just having one coach. You got to have multiple coaches, because there's different parts of your life.
Sure.
Do you think we need a coach or mentor too? With all this financial problems we're having?
I don't know. It might end up nowhere,
You and your excuses again. Let's just keep watching. We might need to think about it.
All right, so the coaching has kind of helped you out in different areas to kind of help you sort your ideas and various things like that. So the second thing you mentioned was your story.
Yeah.
So how did the coaches help you with that story, and what did that story do for you?
Well, the story just looked like
define the story.
Okay, so I look at it as, we all have birthdays.
Yeah.
Okay, the way I look at birthdays is it's just starting the next chapter. And so, what I wish I would have done this throughout my life, but, later on, I actually started documenting and actually writing down what are the things that happened in my life during that chapter of my life. So, as I get ready to turn to the next chapter, I go back and reflect. Well, that chapter was the story of that year, right?
Okay.
Whether it's, my 21st year or 25th year or whatever it is, but then I can go back and that's a part of my legacy and everything else. But when you do that, you actually start to see patterns in how you naturally show up in the world,
Okay.
right? And where you really thrive, and maybe where you have challenges and struggles, right? And maybe that there's this pattern that's constantly showing up, and you need to break it, because whether it's you go through cycles of debt, right? We grew up, I would say, a great family, and yet we didn't have everything, right? We grew up in a pretty small house and stuff, but we had a loving family and all that stuff, so we were rich there.
Yeah.
But financially speaking, we had to make our, we had to get creative and entertainment and stuff. And
The balance sheet wasn't always balanced.
Yeah, and yet, parents worked as hard as they could and all that stuff to give us everything we needed. And we had everything we needed because it gave us the knowledge to be able to go forward. Yet, a lot of times, what I've always seen is people get into this mentality that they have a hard time breaking through, right? Or they duplicate the patterns of the people that have come before them as far as finances and stuff. And so maybe they can't break through, or they constantly live in debt, or they're using credit cards inappropriately and that kind of stuff, to a point where it's putting stress and pressure on them.
It's scary to think that we're having that mentality right now.
It is. I can see that we might need to rewrite our mindset or something.
So looking back at the story, you can actually start to see those patterns and go, okay, maybe this is where I need a mentor. Maybe this is where I need a coach to come in and help me break that pattern, because that's what they do.
So the story is more of it's a mental game we play.
It is, right?
It's what's playing internally, right?
Yeah. There's a saying, and I joke. I don't know. There's some truth to this, I guess, but there's this saying that the world doesn't revolve around you,
Right. Okay. So now we're going to get into the world.
The world, right? The world doesn't revolve around you. Well, I hate to say this, but it does, because from your perspective.
Hold on.
Yeah, light bulb moment, right? Like mind blown. Yes, because
All right. Now, so just to be clear, we have talked about this a little bit previously. So just buckle up, sit down. This is fun.
So the idea of like our consciousness is our reality.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, so the world really does revolve around us, and it's how we interact with the world. We were having a conversation yesterday in a car on the way to go to lunch, and the concept we started talking about colorblind. People are colorblind. Well, and it goes, well, how do you describe color to someone else? Because what might be blue to you is green to them.
Right.
But how do you know if that is actually different, right? So then if you're sitting there thinking about the concept of the world doesn't revolve around you, well, it actually does, because that's your consciousness and perception of the world, okay? So when it comes to our stories, we have to then tie that back to what is our reality and what are the patterns that we need to break, because it's all a mental game. Right? Everything's a mental game, and we just have to run through that process. So when it comes to the elements of our life, yes, there's finances, there's family, there's relationships, there's all these things. There's fitness, right? Everybody wants to go to the gym and get fit and all that kind of stuff. But
That's the whole health, wealth, relationships.
But how often are we spending time working on our mental fitness and our mental health, right? And it's such a big topic today. But when you're faced with constant barrage on social media and this entertainment clickbait world, where it's just look at this, and you get stuck in this superficial, quick pace, like shots of endorphin, looking at other people's lives for your escape, that's a problem.
Right.
Because then you don't slow down long enough to actually hear what's going on up here to make your own decisions.
Okay.
And guide your world the way it needs to be guided.
Okay. All right. So
that's my thought, my process.
No, that's brilliant. Because we really do make decisions in a world of so many other people.
Yeah.
But we make all of our decisions in our own little world. I've heard.
It's sad to think that nowadays, people often forgot to develop their mindset.
Yeah, with all the distractions out there, we forget to prioritize and create better decisions.
Referred to as our worldview, right?
Yeah.
So looking at our worldview, looking at our world, our perception of the world as we see it, our internal story that goes on, how do finances and how does our money, or how does all of this affect our finances and our money, and how we respond financially?
Well, okay, if you're, how do I say this, right? There's a saying, money is the root of all evil, right? I don't agree with that. I think money is actually a tool. Money is a tool for us to be able to do things, to give back, to acquire things. I think that's what you're into and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, when you are in a position of financial desperation, right? If you're constantly having more month than there is money, right, then your mindset is in more of a mentality of fight or flight.
Right.
It's in survival. It's in a place that you're in this primal place of being and state that you can't think beyond. I got to make $5,000 this month. And
fear.
Yeah, you're feared because I got to make $5,000 this month, because otherwise, if I don't, I can't pay the rent. I can't pay the mortgage. I don't know how to put food on the table. And so it affects our clarity and the ability to make clear decisions on finances moving forward, right? Because everybody wants to invest, everybody wants passive income and all this other stuff. But if you're not in a place where you're financially able to do that just because of your mentality, it's dangerous, it's scary.
That's 100%. So a lot of people think, okay, what do I need to do? But really what I'm hearing is it's less about what you need to do, and it's more about how you think about it.
Yeah.
So our thought process is probably more important than our actions. So thoughts kind of lead to the actions, right?
Right. Our perception is our reality.
That's right.
Right? Our
That's
perception
right.
is our reality. And when we start changing your perception of how the world is, and it could be as simple as going, well, I don't have enough, to
Right.
I have enough.
Right.
right? I have enough for what I have been given, yet is there more that I can do? Of
Sure.
course. And it starts to look at our priorities,
There you go.
right? When you start looking at a good exercise, and I've taken people through this so many times, but and I think you talk about this too, but like when you talk about, look at the bank statement exercise. Have you done that? Okay, like do the bank statement exercise where you actually go through and you look at your bank statement for the last 2-3 months, like that last 90 days, pull your bank statements. Look at all of the things on those bank statements and identify the categories for each one of those things. How many times are you eating out?
Right.
What subscriptions do you have?
Right.
And when you look at those things and go, okay, am I educating myself or am I entertaining myself? It becomes a place of going, okay, maybe my priorities need to shift a little bit to, maybe I need to invest a little bit. And maybe it's not much. Maybe it's $10.
Sure.
Maybe it's $100. But by making that little mental shift and start focusing on something different than, oh my goodness, let's go out and eat and let's go do the entertainment. That's all stuff that feels good in the moment, but it doesn't get most people where they want to go out of that survival mode.
All right, so
That's interesting. Do you want to try doing that?
What? The bank statement exercise? I think you're right. Maybe we should.
you'll love this. As a 22-year-old kid, I was working as a waiter bartender, and I had waiter bartenders all tips.
Oh, yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And tight.
Been there.
All right. Thanks, or like November and December are the best 2 months of the year, right? I get into January, and January is like the leanest month of the year because nobody's going out to eat. And so your tips are off and everything like that. So I sat down, I went through my bank statement for a couple months, and nobody told me to do this. I just knew I didn't have any money and I had to figure out where it was going.
Yeah.
So I started highlighting everything, I categorized it.
Yep.
And I found out that I was making approximately $1,200 a month at that time.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, this is a long time ago. Waiters and waitresses make that a night nowadays because tips are so high. But back in those days, I was like, whatever. But I realized in this 1 month, I spent $380 eating out.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. $380? That was 40% of my income
Yeah.
eating out.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Well,
I mean, that was a wake up call for me because it showed me like I was burning. So I call it the leak.
Well, let me ask you something, because in that situation, what was your mentality as to the reason why when you realized that? What did you justify? How did you justify it?
Like why I was eating out.
Yeah.
Oh, at the time it was just I was going out. I was hanging out with my friends. It was social. It was.
Yeah.
I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be part of the crowd. Well, they were going out. Yeah, let's just go out.
Yeah.
But I didn't. What was the problem was I didn't have any controls in place. I didn't have my dollars didn't have a name.
Yep.
So I was just spending freely and didn't even know that I was losing I call it the leak.
Yep.
It's just leaking. All right. So we do this bank statement thing.
Yeah.
It's a mentality, it's a game. We have to check on the patterns.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to the pebble in the pond.
Okay.
How do our finances impact this pebble in the pond idea?
All right. So the simplest way I can put this, right? Like if your mentality is in a state of survival, okay? Each of us every single day when we wake up, we have a split second to decide how are we going to treat this day. Most of us are unconscious of that, right? You wake up, you open your eyes, and you just start moving on. Whether you pick up your phone, you start looking at social media, you look at, your emails, whatever it is. Like, but when it comes to our finances, if we're in a state of survival, are we really showing up as our best self?
Right.
Right? Another thing I talk about is be you and be real. Like, live your authentic self every single day. Well, if your authentic self is in scarcity and fight or flight, when you come up to interact with somebody, how are you going to show up? Right? So when we talk about the world, and I'm going to come back to that because our world is our perception, and those that are around us, our interactions are the world around us. Right? When we talk about the world, most of us think from a worldly view with 8 billion people. But what if you just made the conscious effort every single day to make a choice to make an impact with the people that are right in front of you?
With 2 or 3.
With 2 or 3. right? Whether it's if you're going to grab coffee, or if you're opening the door for somebody and you make a decision to say hi or give them a smile, right? You don't know what that effect can do for other people, and that's why it's ripples, right? Our quick, brief interactions can actually create ripples that sometimes, where we think it's a small pebble, is actually a giant boulder in somebody's pond, because they're going through a mental game where we just need to bring a little bit of positivity to somebody else's life, right? Or whether it's becoming a mentor and picking up a kid like so many did for me as I started growing up, and now I get to do the same thing in return. So the people that came before me that poured into me, their ripples are still continuing on, even though they're gone, right? They're gone from this world, but they're still a part of my life, which then I can continue to give on.
See, what I think is so cool about this, guys, so many times people, when they're talking about money, they're talking about making an impact with money, they think they have to set up some kind of huge trust fund and this huge philanthropy, and we're giving millions of dollars to have our name on a library or something. And you think, okay, that's legacy or whatever. But the reality is that when we are stuck, when we're in survival mode, when we're in this fight or flight mode, we're not helping anybody. But when we get unbroke and our mind is free from that financial stress, it's not about the amount of money, it's about the impact, because you're not necessarily spending money to smile at somebody. But if you're stressed out all the time, you're angry and you're frustrated, and the impact you're making is more damaging than it is good. So it's not about the amount of money or how you're necessarily using the money. It's that mental game that we play and how we show up around us, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, a perfect example of this, right? Like, and you just said it, a smile is free, right? If you're doing a random act of kindness every single day, it doesn't have to cost you anything. You know, I was actually in an airport one time, and I tell this when I'm giving this talk and all that stuff. So if you hear this and you ever hear me speak, then you'll hear it again. But I was in an airport one time, and I was coming from a small mastermind in Chicago with this company that we were launching, and we were going through this whole process, right? There's like 10 of us. But as I was leaving and I was getting ready to go back home, like all of a sudden, from the time I went in, it was blue skies, went into the airport, got to my gate, and this crazy fog storm had come in. Grounded and delayed all flights. Okay, so it was kind of like on that the movies and stuff where it's like delay, and it just starts popping up on the registers and stuff. Well, it's January of 2020, so I see people walking around. Some people have masks on, and like the terminals filling up and flooding. I look on the TVs and they're talking about coronavirus, and I'm like, I don't know what that is because I don't watch the news. And so I just put my headphones in and I cocoon myself and I start walking around just listening to music and everything else. Well, as it starts filling up, I'm like, man, I got to grab a seat because there's thousands of people in this terminal. So I finally find a seat and I sit down with my stuff, and I get to a point where my movie ends and I'm like, man, I'm just tired. My ears hurt from having earbuds in all day. And so I just sit down and I start looking around and I start noticing all the families and the people in the airport, and 90% of them are doing this. They're not engaging with each other. They're not talking to each other. They're yelling at the person at the behind the counter and the customer service and stuff. And I'm like, wow, people aren't interacting with each other. And so in my moment, I had a choice of like, okay, I look around, the people beside me, this person over here is doing this guy over here had just put his stuff down. And I was like, hey, what's up? And I started a conversation, you know, and didn't really know where it was going to go, but just started to interact with them. Well, we start the niceties and all that stuff. Oh, what do? You here for work? Well, all that stuff. Well, long story short, he ends up asking me what I do. I tell him I'm actually going to speak at an event the next day, and I was a keynote for it. And he was like, well, tell me your story. So I proceed to tell him my story and the journey that I had been through. And as I get ready to be at the end of it, he starts tearing up. Grown man who's probably 10 years older than I am, tears up and starts crying. And I'm like, okay, I hit a nerve, something. I said, what's going on? And he looks at me and says, Nathan, where you were at a year ago is exactly where I'm at today. And he said, I was actually on my way home to tell my wife, I don't know how I'm going to keep going, because he was there for work and he was just kept like killing himself with work. And he wasn't happy. He was a shell of a human at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I got to treat this with like kid gloves right here. And I said, okay, here's the thing. I hired somebody to go through this process with me because that's where I was. I was a zombie. And as I walked him through the process of here's the questions, write these down. You've got a 3-hour flight ahead of you. I need you, like, or I don't need you, like, you need to really figure this out. And as soon as I gave him that paper and I said, here are the questions that you need to ask, intercom came on, said, all flights have been cleared, make your way to your gates. Guy picks up, he goes to his flight, I go to mine. The only thing I know about him is his name is Mike. So that in this representation of mentality, I had a choice. It was free.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I paid for the experience. I paid for the lesson that I learned the hard way, but I was able to pass that on to Mike.
Right.
I wish I'd have gotten his information now, but I'll never know. I'll never know how that story affected him or how it affected him. It clearly had an impression on him because making a grown man cry in an airport, that's crazy. And yet I knew in that moment, and that solidified for me this idea of being a pebble in the pond. It's not about money.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about taking the time to make a choice to interact with somebody around you.
Right.
And see what you can do to make their world better.
Right.
That's
Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking for a while. And,
yeah. Thanks for sticking around. I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
I've been
know,
talking,
right?
but yeah.
But dude, this is awesome. I hope we can do this again. 'Cause,
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Anytime.
You know, I mean, this idea of being a pebble in a pond, it's a free concept, but the problem is most of us aren't free.
Yeah.
Right? We live in this world inside of our heads, and we're not paying attention to what's going on around us. And until we can free up and break these cycles in our thinking, there's no amount of money that's ever going to fix that.
Yeah.
You can have more money in the world. There's a lot of very, very rich, depressed, lonely people. There's a lot of very, very wealthy, depressed hermits. And money's not the answer. You don't need more money, you need more freedom.
Yeah.
And the freedom starts here. Financial freedom is in your head long before your bank account reflects it. And so you want to be a pebble in a pond, you want to make a difference in the world, then you got to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
And so, Nathan, I am so grateful that.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Sure.
And I'll just, like, final thought, what you just said struck something with me, and it's basically this. And I was told this. I didn't like this advice when I first got it.
Do we like any advice we get?
You know, but you've got to work on yourself before you can work on anybody else. You have to work on yourself before you can give back. Before you can go through that process, you have to lay a strong foundation for yourself,
Right.
and start there,
Right.
Because if you're pouring from an empty cup, there's not much to give.
Right.
And so you got to take care of yourself. You got to build that foundation. You got to start here and get it going. But yeah, man, it's been a good conversation, dude. I enjoyed it.
Dude, man,
Anytime,
I
dude.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna share some information in the description on if you like stuff that Nathan just shared. I'll share how you can find more from him. And guys, we appreciate you. And this is always, 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 man, keep it real and let's get on broke.
It's amazing to think that small, simple steps can lead to greater results.
Yes, this could help us with our decision making when it comes to our finances.
We should start now.